Do you have any plan to actually impose constraints on how much oil, or the increase in oil consumption in the exporting oil countries? It's all very well reducing imports in the import lands, but what about reducing consumption in the export lands?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's one we're going to have to look at as we develop the ideas around the protocol. The protocol itself is a work in progress. What I showed you are terms that Colin has drafted and that several others of us have worked on, but I wouldn't say that it's a done deal. It's a final, accept this or else sort of situation. We're working on it, and we're very much open to suggestions along the lines of dealing with problems like that that maybe nobody's really thought through yet.
Julian, I'm fascinated with the idea of a alternative energy-backed currency, and if you could just elaborate a bit more in terms of the practicality, feasibility, whether any existing models or folks that are actually trying to attempt to do this. Thanks.
Now, this was proposed some years ago, energy-backed currency rather than renewable energy-backed currency, although some have done that too, by various people, and I don't think anybody's actually tried to enact it. Via the energy farms, which we do have two of now, one with nearly a year of experience, at least we've got some renewable energy to actually back something with. And essentially, in the experiment which we're going to try, and we'll see how it goes, I openly admit that it's just an experiment, that normally, or at least in the past, we used to back, say, currency with gold or silver, and you would go and redeem, say, $1 or £1 for a certain amount of gold. Imagine if you could go and redeem that different currency or some kind of credit or coupon for a certain amount of energy, in this case renewable energy. And the idea behind that would be that you would then, by that means, you would not be able to do vastly more economic activity and move more things around than your locale could actually furnish in terms of renewable energy. Now, there'd have to be some kind of multiplier in there because unfortunately energy is so cheap that if we did it the way it is now, you wouldn't actually be able to do very much at all, and in the long transition that would be very troubling. So that's basically it. You would actually be able to redeem your currency for energy. You'd be able to do other things too with it, and the other thing I can offer you is watch this space. We're going to be trying it very, very soon, and we'll see how it goes, and I hope to say more about it in the future. There is an article about it on alternet.org, and there is a chapter about it in the new book, Relocalize Now.
So in regards to the urgent need of educating the public, what thoughts could you share with us about how to comprehend and move forward with the peak oil issues we've heard about over the last 2 days in the context of the 9/11 Truth Movement?
I think all of us here are doing our damnedest to educate the public on these issues, and obviously we have to do more. I think those who are making documentary films have contributed enormously to this. That's a form of communication that gets out to enormous numbers of people, and ordinary broadcast media tends toward the sound bites. It's very difficult to explain the complex problems around peak oil in sound bites, whereas you can do it in a documentary film. So I think that's a really good means. But beyond that, I think the nature is going to help us to a certain degree. As prices go up, that raises awareness. I think the increase of price over the last couple of years has probably done more to highlight the problem of peak oil and get some of us in the news than anything else, anything we personally could have done.
This is a scenario. Take as a given that instead of somehow magically meeting supply going forward, we in fact see a supply shortfall. How would that affect your planning purposes going forward? And I'll give you two concepts. One is we've hit it now, and the second one is we hit it in 10 years. So 2 time frames, today, 10 years, but we are going to hit a supply shortfall. That's just the scenario, that's the given that I'm asking you to address.
First of all, this is not a hypothetical question. It's a question that we're actually asking ourselves today, in which we're now taking our growth and transportation plan, and we're posing to ourselves the question that was just posed to me, and that is, what if we have a substantial increase in the price of gasoline? What will that do to travel within our region? And furthermore, what will the policies that we're now developing within our region on the land-use transportation relationship, how will that affect it? We haven't yet run the model, but let me give you my own kind of intuitive assessment, having worked with transportation models now for over 30 years. And that is, there is definitely a price elasticity with respect to gasoline. The marginal changes that we've seen in the last several years, and by the way, in real dollars, we're still not, with the peak prices that we had, we're still below the price of gasoline that we had in, say, 1980 or 1974. I mean, we've just had, the price increases have, in real dollars, not gotten to a point where there has been an increase. We do know that substantial increases are going to lead to a reinforcement of the development patterns that we've put on the table. We know that that it will accelerate the rate at which we change our planning and the modification of our cities. And how far we go, I don't know. Let me add one other observation, and that is we can have double, triple, quadruple the price of gasoline, and it still will not have the effect on the consumer that the price of housing has had within our region and within our state in the last, say, 7 to 10 years. We've had a substantial increase. Our housing prices have nearly tripled over the last decade. I mean, that's in the last 12 years, that's a substantial increase. There's a converging of forces that are going to, that in my view, will alter our development patterns. So I don't care whether it's 5 years from now or 15 years from now. We're going to see a much changed development pattern within our metropolitan areas, probably driven by the price of housing over the next decade, as opposed to the price of gasoline. But if it's 5 years from now, if it's now, then that'll just add to that transition that we're going through. And let me just say one last observation, and that is 85% of all the housing that we sell in the next 30 years will not be to traditional families. We're changing as a country. All the changes that are occurring demographically and economically, I don't think we should be afraid of them. I think they're forces that are moving us in a direction to in fact change patterns. I mean, I'd like to have an interesting discussion with Julian on whether or not we're in a global world or whether we're in a local world, but that's another issue, another question.
Easy, quick question, maybe not easy, for Richard Heinberg. The oil depletion protocol seems like a very reasonable response to the situation before us. How do you see the possibility of the United States adopting that as a national policy, given our obsession with the military direction?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, because obviously we've already committed enormous national treasure, built infrastructure, built military hardware and bases and so on to what I would call, Plan A, last one standing. And so it's going to be very difficult to change course, but we have to, as Michael Clare made so clear. The way that we're going now has no future. The U.S. is not going to be able to control global oil flows by military means. I think that it's getting clearer and clearer every day that that's true. And once national leadership finally accepts that, there's really only one other course, and that is to cooperate with other nations to share what's left, and that means reducing consumption.